right, guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and start the video there. We're gonna start by prepping for the actual painting itself. Just a reminder, if you take a look at my palette, like if I get a little closer, it's still actually a little bit, like if I touch it with the back of this, it's still a little bit wet. So I still have some paint on there, and that's fine. I can go ahead and use it for this one. I am going to be going over this particular image because this is a photograph that I took. However, color-wise, I am going to change it. I'm going to enhance it a little bit. So I have like yellows, oranges. I'll probably include a little bit more of the red, but more on the orangey hue. And then I have purples, blues, and that sort of color that you see here. I am not going to incorporate, as far as a black is concerned, I'm going to be using more of the blue and purple to get those hints that you see like in the shadows here. However, like I said, I will be manipulating color, okay? So to get started, we're not gonna do the whole entire thing today. We're gonna break this up into 3 separate videos. The first video is gonna consist of the sky only in this area. So as far as colors that I'm gonna be putting onto my palette, I will be putting a little bit of red. So you guys already know I'm working with the big ones that are a little bit harder, so I kind of have to put this off screen, but if you kind of see, I'm trying to just apply just a little bit of color to where it's not going to come out a whole bunch, because you guys already know that stretching paint is pretty easy when it comes to manipulating acrylics. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put some red. I also know I'm going to be using yellow for sure. And usually for the most part, when people start paintings, they tend to get the primary colors out just in general, just because that way at least you have some type of colors to be able to mix and blend if you need it, okay? And I will be putting also a little bit of blue, so pretty much the primary, but that's because I do want to make just a little bit of purple to start off with. Now I'm going to put just a little bit of blue because this one I'm not going to use as much of, so I'm going to try my best to put, if more comes out, it's okay. When I put the paint away, that's what I use my Ziploc bag. So if I accidentally get too much, it'll eventually get used within the project, okay? And I will be also applying some white. No black today. I don't really want to use black unless I notice that I really need it, but I'm going to try to stay away from black. Right now, I'm just using those particular 4 colors. Usually that's why I recommend buying at least, even if it's just one, because you can always, let's say if I buy a big bottle like this of white, I can always try my best to get it into this. It's just easier to squeeze out of these. That's why I recommend, if you do buy, to buy those, just because as you, like I said, as you apply the paint out to the actual palette over here, it's just a little bit easier to control it, okay? So at this point, I am going to take a look at, so I'll kind of have this on screen just because I'm going to be working on the top half. So I can kind of get away with showing you some of the image there. If you take a look at the size of the actual skyline here, like where we're going to look at the horizon line, it is a lot of sky. So the bottom portion over here, so I'm probably going to, more than likely enhance it. I'm not gonna put it directly lower. So it's like if I was looking at it, like if I was trying to do this realistic, the bottom portion would be somewhere about right here, but I'm actually going to lift it just slightly, and if I feel like, okay, well then I just won't paint all the way down to the bottom, I can do that. But so that way it fits on screen for you guys to be able to see the whole process. I'm gonna go ahead and make my horizon line somewhere at about here. Okay, so I'll just be putting this right here off to the side, just so you can see slightly more or less of where I'm going to be applying the horizon line. So first off, I know we're not working with watercolor, we are working with acrylic, but I am gonna go back to my techniques of what I taught you guys with the watercolor by first setting myself that line just with water only. So I know we haven't done this because with acrylic, it's just been manipulating the paint, putting it onto the canvas. So just because we might not be working with watercolor doesn't necessarily mean that I can't go back to those particular techniques that I originally taught you guys with watercolor and use some of those same techniques with the acrylic, because you can, okay? So what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm just going to wet my paper, just more or less where I want my horizon line, just so that way I know that it's not gonna tend to go beyond that when I start applying the paint. And to kind of make it a little guide for me. If you want a tint of color, kind of like what we did with the watercolor, I would stick with the yellows just because, you know, it's the lightest of all the colors. So if you want to really drown out that yellow and make it super watery, almost like if it is watercolor, you can apply a little hint, and you can barely see it on my paper. That's how light it should be if you're going to put a color down, just as a guide for you to be able to know where to stop. And you can barely see, like if I lift it, you can kind of see a hint of that color, but it's just so light. So that way, as I'm painting, I can put the acrylic on top of that if I'm not happy with that color and I know it's going to be more of like a blue tint towards the bottom. Okay. So now at this point, we're still having to think back to the process of what we did with the original ones that we did over here with the practice. So if you take a look at the skies and so forth, and then taking a look at an original picture over here, it's gonna still be putting that same technique, but you gotta follow more or less the colors where the color placement is. So if I take a look at it, this particular, if you look at the actual sky, is more linear. And if you look at this one, it is a little bit more of that round shape. So we are going to be working the same way we did that technique. However, we're going to be working from the center out. Okay. So if I look at my colors towards the very brightness of the sun, it's like the sun, I can almost say that it's white. Okay. So we're going to save that white for that at the very, very end, once we're finished painting the entire sky. So what we want to do is we want to make a lighter version of the yellow. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of the yellow. So those of you guys that are following along with me, you know, because you're going to paint my exact picture that I'm going with here, then you're just going to take some yellow and put it off here to the side. For those of you guys that if you took a photograph and it's a totally different color, like you're not going to use yellow, let's say you're going to stick to the blues because that's the color of your sky, then you would do the same thing just with, of course, the blue colors. Okay. So I do want to make sure that I remove as much of the yellow as possible. So I'm just going to drape it here off to the side. Then I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush in the water and then clean off the excess just with my napkin. Okay. Just to make sure that I get the majority of it off before I get white, because that's how we brighten up the colors. So I will get some of the white. So I'm going to lift a good amount of that white on there. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to mix over here on the side, not directly in the middle of that yellow, because that might be too much yellow. So why do I want to start off automatically? If I know I'm going to have to be adding yellow to this pigment as I work my way out, as it gets a little bit of a darker yellow as it moves out. So I'm going to start off with white first. Even want a little bit more than that. So I'm going to actually remove it over here off to the side just so I can kind of collect that. I'm not going to rinse it with the water just because that's such a bright yellow that if I just remove a lot, it shouldn't damage my white over here. So I'm just going to lift a little bit more white over here and apply it here because I just want it just a little lighter of a yellow. If you're happy with the color you have, then just leave it. Remember, yours don't have to follow exactly mine. I'm just showing you the technique as I'm gonna work with it. Now, if I kind of more or less look at my area here of where I've got the sky in the picture, the sun actually falls somewhere about right here, more or less. You know, my bridge in the picture over here falls somewhere about right here. So I'm trying to estimate it from this section. So if you're working off of your own photograph, try to pay attention where things lie on the actual photograph, and then try to do the same placement of whatever you're painting on your paper. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and you can kind of see that it's already having somewhat of a color. It's not very bright and it's not too dark. So I'm starting off with this tone. I'm just going to work my way, and I'm actually kind of going like the same kind of texture that I was doing with the other one, where I'm kind of going almost like in a crisscross little pattern. So I'm applying some strokes in this direction, some strokes in this direction. I'm just working kind of like in a circle shape. So now I already have some of this color. I know on the next layer, I'm going to have to get a little darker. So I'm going to apply a little bit more yellow here into the white, a little bit. And so now I'm going to apply some of this, and you can notice that it's starting to get a little bit darker on my page. I'm still adding some of that texture. So I'm going like in a crisscross motion as I work my way out. So I'm going to get a little bit more yellow And now I'm gonna go with another layer on the out over here, but going like a crisscross. Now, if I want to see more of that texture, I can get away with applying just a few little of those strokes in the lighter color. So that's an option for you. If I want some light more in this area, like I want some of that light so I can see the texture a little better, make sure you remove the pigment off of your brush first. I'm just gonna wet it a little bit because I did have too much paint on it. And then pick up some of that light color that you might still have over here if you want to apply just a little bit of the light strokes in there. Okay, so it's just going back and forth with the texture. So at this point, now I know that I'm gonna start going into a little bit darker of a yellow. So I'm just gonna pick up this yellow, which is kind of like the actual natural yellow that I have over here. And I'm just gonna start applying some more yellows. Remember that when we originally did the other painting, the practice, when we did the blues, we were working with the other color first. And then as we did the blues, we kind of made like a transparent blue to go. So I want to extend the yellow. Even in my picture, the yellow pretty much stops somewhere at about right here, but I need to extend my yellow slightly because as I bring the blue in, I'm gonna have to go over that yellow. So I do want to extend it slightly out. So for those of you guys that are working on your own portrait or your own landscape, like of a picture that you took, whatever color you're going into for the transition, you need to take it out slightly, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna add crisscross texture all the way this way. Now on my actual photograph, if I notice it, it's more of like an oval shape. It's not round. So I'm gonna add just a little bit more of the yellow, a little bit on the side here and a little bit more right here. Because we have a cloud that kind of sits on top of this. So that's why it goes out. It's not necessarily with those particular tones. The other thing I noticed, so if I show you on screen, the other thing I noticed, we're gonna start moving into more of an orangey tone down here on the bottom, but there's also some yellow on top above that. So because of that, I am actually going to stretch some of this yellow, and I'm just gonna get some of this leftover yellow that I have over here, and I'm just going to take that up slightly just here in this section only. Again with the crisscross. We're just getting a texture. And then, you know, I'm not gonna worry about filling all of it because there's gonna be clouds and so forth there. And then I'm also going to take it down slightly just because I am going to put some orange over here in this spot. So I'm just gonna start extending with those little X patterns. Right here is the line that I have originally for the horizon line. So I'm gonna just take it down and I'm gonna probably get to somewhere about like right here with this yellow. And all I'm doing is I'm just using whatever yellow I've got available to me. And I just don't want to waste paint. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use it. Now, also, if you notice in the picture that I have more yellow down on the bottom than I do on the top. So at this time, I'm just going to grab some more of the paint and I'm going to also extend some of this color. It's a little darker. It's a little bit more of an orange hue, and that's fine. Because I believe originally when I had the paint in this area, if you notice on my palette, there's like a little bit of that red coming through. So some of this stuff, because I do have it in the Ziploc bag, it's not gonna dry completely. And sometimes that's to my benefit because down here, it actually does turn to more orange as far as the color is. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just stretch it and leave it alone. If yours doesn't have an orange tint, you want to just touch a little bit of the red, the wet that's over here. That way you can add over here in this section. That's fine. I'm going to put some more because I notice like it's wet still. So I'm going to touch the red as I'm mixing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some of this color down here towards the bottom because that's the way it is in the photograph as far as color tones. And it is a little brighter than if I compare it to the photograph. It is a little bit brighter of a tone because it's not that orange on the picture, but like I said, I am going to want to enhance some of these colors and I'm going to exaggerate them because it is Impressionism. And when you're usually doing Impressionism, most of the colors are very exaggerated to begin with. They tend to be more muted in real life. And then when you're painting them in this style, they tend to be a little bit brighter than what they are. I'm just gonna go back and kind of get some of this texture in here. And I kind of like this color, so I'm even gonna extend it just a slightly into here. It's because I do like that tone, so I kind of want to bring just a little bit, just so you can see more of the texture. So you can go back and forth. If the color looks a little darker, go back and forth on the areas that are a little bit lighter and add some of that color in there. And if you like the color that's already there, you do have more of that color on the brush. So if you don't want to grab it from here because you're scared it's going to manipulate your color, you can just touch a little bit of the water, and with whatever paint is on there, it'll go ahead and remove off of, because there's technically paint inside the brush. It's not, a lot of it is just when you're releasing it like this, it's what's on the outside part of the brush, but there is paint inside the actual bristles. So if you just touch the water, you'll get that same color, and just, of course, it'll be more diluted, but it's still the same color if you want to make sure that you apply that particular color to a spot first before you go and touch and grab more paint. Put on top, okay? I'm just putting a little bit of this color. Some of the blue is going to go over this part that I'm applying, but like I said, you have to put a layer first before you can do the transitions from the colors to color. So I'm just going to extend just a little bit over here off to the side as well. I'm extending this way. I'm just going to extend to this way. And now that I have that, I do want to make sure I'm also incorporating the light blue. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to clean off my brush. I'm going to make sure that I rinse it really well. If you have a lot of paint, I didn't. If you have a lot of paint, before you dip it into the water, remember to remove, like to get, that way you don't have to be changing out the water so much. You want to remove as much paint first before you dip and rinse into the water, and then come back and then you can clean with your napkin, okay? If you lose the tip of your brush, remember to just roll the brush on whatever surface you have, whether it's a newspaper or your tissue paper. Just make sure that you roll the brush to get that point back, okay? So now at this time, I know I'm gonna wanna do some light blues. That's my next step on this. So what I'm gonna end up doing is I am going to get the blue. So now that I have a clean brush, I'm gonna pick up the blue. I'm gonna put it here where I was originally mixing the blues on the last project. I'm gonna try to remove as much of the blue as possible from my brush before you want to drag it. Remember, there's paint inside the bristles, guys. So if you do this and you try to scrape it along the edge, that's what all these edges are for when you have the palettes. So that way you can remove as much as possible first before you try to wipe it down and clean your brushes. And so at this point, it's clean enough to be able to get some of the white. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up the rest of my white because I'm not going to work with white. I'm going to just go ahead and use that to mix into the blue. Starting off on the side, I'm not going directly in the middle. I'm starting off on the side over here and mixing it slowly. So that way it doesn't get too dark. I want a light blue, so I want to make sure that I try to get it as light as possible first. And I would prefer that I mix it and it's like, no, it's not dark enough. And then you can add some of the dark blue rather than, you know, getting too much of the white. I'm sorry, too much of the blue too fast. Okay. So now that I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and start with applying the light blue. Now, I don't want it to be so strong. So what I'm going to do is, instead of removing it to be able to get the water, I'm just going to take my brush and I'm going to dip it in the water. So it's just, be very careful because it's got water, so it'll drip. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and remove slowly. So that way it's more watery, and start off kind of light first before I start adding too much too fast. And then I'm going to go ahead and just that crisscross, same motion. You know, I'm going to come over here and first remove a lot of that paint because it should be pretty dark, you know, as far as the tone itself, the color. It's not watery just yet. So I'm going to remove first. I'm going to come in, I'm going to put whatever I've got over here where I know I'm going to have that light blue. Dip it into the water again, do the same thing on the other side. Make sure that I get that little crisscross pattern. Because that's the pattern I'm doing for the sky, is going to be crisscross. When I move to the water and the bridge, that's where I'm going to change the direction of my strokes, so that way I can get the different texture, different movement. Now, right now I'm just putting the first layer. I am going to go back with a little bit darker of a light blue to get that second texture, so you actually see the texture, because on some of it, it does disappear, like over here where I use the water, and that's fine because I need that light and I need the dark. So I want to make sure that I get both, the contrast. So I'm going to first do the light, apply it. I'm going to get a little bit more of the light blue paint now. And then I'll go on top of that, and you can see now it's a little bit darker, so that way I have both the light and the dark, and I can see more texture of that color. I'm just going to keep going, making sure that on the areas that kind of blended too much, that's where I for sure want to make sure that I put the strokes first as I'm applying the new paint. So if I pick up paint, I want to hit those spots first. Right here, it got lost. I want to make sure that I apply that. Now, I know that this has to be blended. This has to be transitioned. So that's going to be for sure on the area where I pick up water. I want to come over here to one of these areas that are empty. So I know it's still got some, but I'm just going to apply this down here, release, drop my paint, and add a little bit more water to it to make it more of a almost watercolor consistency. A little bit more water, because I still have a lot of paint inside that brush, inside the bristles. So I'm going to remove as much as possible. And then now that I kind of have it more of a watery consistency, now I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it on top of that yellow. It should have already had enough time to dry on that yellow. So this yellow, if I come and touch it here, it's pretty much dry to the touch. Acrylic dries very fast. That's why a lot of people love to paint with acrylic, because they know how fast it does dry up. And that just makes it a lot easier to go back if you'd make mistakes and so forth like that. You know, you can just go on top of it, right over it as it's drying. So I'm just gonna use this watery blue to transition into the edge where that yellow is. Remember, I originally took that yellow out just a little bit, so that way I can put that light blue on top. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more of that texture right on top of it. It's not done yet. Right now I'm just doing that first layer. So all of this is gonna get that light blue, that watery light blue. There's even some in here. So wherever I see it on my photograph, I'm just gonna apply that light blue on top of that yellow. Remember, going crisscross. You want some going in this direction, some going in this direction. Think of it like an X, like this and this. You want X's. We'll put a little bit more over here. Make sure I put some down here on the bottom. And then I want to also put some on this side. So I do want to extend this down here, because the way I have the blue, the light blue hit here, it's also going to be on this side too. We're getting the watery light blue is what you're applying there. For those of you guys that are working on your own pictures, like let's say you wanted to work from your own reference, a photograph you took, it's basically the same concept as far as looking at the colors. What are you working with, and what colors are you going to put in what area? So let's say if you have a sky, for instance, that has more pinks and so forth, it's the same concept. You're still working with it. So whatever the pink is turning into, all you're doing is just making a watery version of that color, so that way you have the blending in between the two, okay? Now it's not finished yet. That's just the first layer of that light blue that I'm gonna do the transitions to. Now I have to get that original light blue that I mixed that's a little bit darker, and I'm gonna do the same thing right on top towards the edge of where that original yellow was turning into. So I'm going to put more of that darker light blue again here towards the edge. And this is the one that's not watery consistency. This is the one that's a little bit thicker. It's going to cover more. All this area was the part, and you can tell the difference between this versus this. This is the part that you can see that I applied the stuff that has more water. Now, if your paint is not moving, you can apply more water to it. That's fine, because I've had kids where they're like, well, ma'am, I'm applying it, but it's not coming off my brush as easy. That's because you can add just a tiny bit of water to it, so that way as you do the brush strokes, it will come off the brush. Because if it's clinging on to your bristles and not necessarily being removed, that's just because it's starting to dry up. So yeah, add some water to it at that point. But you know, towards the outside, we're gonna start getting a little bit darker of a tone here. So right now I'm just concentrating on making sure that the edges blend by putting another layer of a darker blue on top of that, especially where I had stopped with the yellow, because we don't want it to be an abrupt, just a line. That's what some of the people were coming into problems with when they were their practices. When I saw them upload it, they were having too many lines and not necessarily transition. So you do have to make sure that not only are you doing the brush stroke, but also the actual layers that you're applying have the different tones. That's why I show you guys how to put the part first with water first, so that way you get a light version, and then you can do almost like a medium tone that falls on the top. Okay. This one's still lacking the cloud structure on top of it. So that's what's going to help it a lot when it comes to the transitioning part of it, is going to be once I start adding those clouds. But for right now, you know, I'm just concentrating on that transition for the sky tone. I'm going to put a few more strokes here because it's lacking that transition. I do want to make sure I go back and forth. And, you know, if I notice that this one looks a little bit darker, it will dry up a little bit lighter. But if I think it might not dry the same, then just take that same color up to the top on the original brush strokes that you were applying first. Put a little bit of that same tone on top. So now that I have that kind of tone that we see there, I'm gonna go ahead and just extend that, and I'm gonna scoot this over so you can see what I'm doing on this side. I'm just gonna extend the same light blue. So first I'm gonna get the one that is more of a watered down blue, because that's what I did originally first. And I'm gonna go ahead and apply. It might look a little darker right now compared, like if I pick it up, it might look a little bit darker than what's here, but that's because it's still wet. As it dries, it will lighten up slightly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and apply that same light blue all the way to the very edge. Just a reminder, I still need the cloud structure that's gonna sit on top of this, but right now I'm only solely concentrating on the background color. But I'm already done with this white, so I'm just gonna pick it up to mix just a little bit more. And then I do have my paint here, so I'm gonna remove as much as possible. Same thing in here too. I can still add more so that way I can water it down and make sure I have my watery blue first before I put the one that's a little bit more concentrate, that doesn't have so much water. So you wanna put the one with water first as a base coat, and then the one that's a little bit stronger on top. I'm gonna put this because my horizon line is all the way over here. So I'm gonna put a few down here too. Remember crisscross, always do the crisscross motion, because that's the one that we're doing for the background as far as where it's going to be for the sky. Sky is gonna be crisscross, and then when we get to the water and the bridge, those are gonna be different directions of brushstroke. So now that I kind of have that section, I'm gonna go ahead and get, again, the light blue that's a little bit stronger and go right on top of that. Try to hit the areas that maybe you might not have touched that is still the color of the paper. You know, that's something that you might want to think about as you're doing that second layer. Double check to see that you are removing the paper background. Because if you still see a lot of that paper coming through when you're done, you know, you want it to be as saturated with color as possible. So just make sure that you're doing that. And if not, what you could do is wait till it dries completely and then do one more layer of the light one, the one that has more of the water. So that way, for sure, all of it is covered and at least there's no paper coming through. So I am gonna get a little bit more white on my plate just because I do need to mix just a little bit more of that light blue just because I ran out of paint. So I am gonna add a little bit more to it before I keep going. So that way, if, and honestly, like if you have to mix yourself some more paint, guys, and let's just say I were to come over here and let's just say it's not the same blue. It still looks pretty much close, but if you're not 100% sure, like you have to mix more, all you have to do is just go back on top of what's already painted a little bit. So that way that same color is applied somewhere else. It's all about balance. So if you do have to mix more because you run out, that is a way to ensure that you know, you'll have some of this color on the same side or on the opposite side. So like, honestly, I'm going to do it right here. And then I'm going to add just a little bit over here just to be on the safe side, because right now it's not dry. And maybe by the time it's completely dry, it's going to look different. So it's just better to be safe than sorry. So if you, like I said, if you had to mix more paint, just apply a little bit of that paint to the opposite side that we were working on, just to ensure that you create balance with the colors. I'm just gonna go crisscross, crisscross. And like I said, we are gonna go over this with the colors, but it's gonna be a different color tone for the clouds. So that's gonna be, we're gonna start the clouds during Wednesday's classes when we'll do the clouds. And I'll upload that video too, so in case somebody misses or something, you can watch it to be able to apply the color, okay? So just to be on the safe side, like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna apply a little bit of the same color that I just mixed. I'm just gonna put a couple of brush strokes over here. It looks pretty much the same, but it's better to be safe than sorry, guys. So I'm even gonna put some up here on the top just to make sure that I have that same color throughout. I'm gonna get it wet just a little bit because it's not moving on me, and you can notice it's not moving because you'll see more of the little hair like stroke rather than the actual brush stroke. So if you're starting to see little, not necessarily the hairs, but like basically if it doesn't have enough water, you're going to see the actual brush ending area here rather than the actual stroke itself. So if you see that, just put a little bit of water on your brush and that should disappear. Okay? I'm just gonna put a few right here because I do notice it looks too much of the same. If areas where the paint looks too similar, that's where you either want to go back with paint that's more diluted with water, or you might want to do something that's a little bit darker. Like if you notice it needs more of the darker paint, okay? So as far as for today, you know, this is pretty much what we're gonna be working on. It's just that first background color. You guys know that when we were doing the watercolor, this is what we had to do. We had to do it in section by section. That's just the way it works. So that way, you know, we have enough time to be able to complete that part without other people not being able to catch up, okay? So I'm gonna just go ahead and I just put it in water only just because I noticed that right here it could use a little bit more transition, especially if I compare the photograph. Like if I go back and forth to the photograph, you'll notice that like right here, there's more of like a blue hint and so forth. So you guys can kind of just like change it up a little too. Remember, you don't have to follow exactly mine. If you like the way it looks with that much orange on the bottom, leave it. You know, I'm just adding a little bit just because I kind of want to go a little bit closer to the photograph. So I am gonna add just some additional strokes of that light blue, the one that has that hint of more of like a water. I'm just gonna go and add just a few more strokes here, just to kind of, have some of those tones. It is lacking a slight hint of more of like it's more of like a purple, like a light lavender almost, but I'm not gonna add that just yet because the lavender is what I'm gonna be doing for the cloud structure that we're gonna be adding after. That's what I'm gonna be doing on the next class period. So this is as far as you need to get for today for those of you guys that are following along with me. If you're doing your own, like I said, if you are doing your own photograph, you took a photograph of a landscape and you might need help. I'm gonna stop the video right now in just a bit. So that way, if you have specific questions on yours, you can ask. But for today, for those of you guys that were following along with me, this is as far as you need to get for today only. Make sure that when you're done getting to this section, that you guys put it off to the side, let it dry. You guys can pick up your materials already. At this point, if you're following along with me, if, like I said, if you're not happy with it, you can always go back and let it dry a little bit and add some color. Like you're like, no, I want the yellow to expand a little bit more. So those are things that you guys can do. I know when I add my cloud coverage, I will be adding a little bit of yellows in between in the clouds. So I'm gonna extend those tones later. Right now, this is as far as I'm gonna get, okay? So let me go ahead and stop the video there.